I really appreciate y'all tuning in today. We're going to talk about the Realtor Code of Ethics, Article 10, specifically the recent changes that were made to Article 10 by the National Association of Realtors. I've got two very special guests with me today to join in on this conversation and to give us their oversight and insights into this. Realtors Matt Difanis and Todd Beckstrom. Matt is the co-owner of Remax Realty Associates in Champaign, Illinois. Matt was the 2020 chair of the NAR Professional Standards Committee. Todd Beckstrom is a top producer with ERA Wilder Realty right here in South Carolina. He's based in Columbia and was recently inducted into the ERA Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Todd. He serves as a member of the SCR Board of Directors and also is a member of the NAR Board of Directors as well. And Todd also served on the NAR Professional Standards Committee under Matt's chairmanship last year. So last summer, as racial injustice made headlines across the country, realtors like Matt and Todd helped lead the charge for NAR to amend its code of ethics, making hate speech a violation of our organization's standard of ethics, not only in professional settings, but in private arenas as well. After a heated debate with multiple members weighing in on whether realtors were living up to their obligation to help find housing for everyone, NAR, the board of directors, voted to pass the Professional Standards Committee's recommendations on November 13th of last year. Matt and Todd are here today to share some of their experiences, what this new policy means for realtors, and their hopes for the future of real estate. To learn more about the policy and how it affects realtors, you can visit NAR's website that's dedicated to this topic, and I'll post this in the comments during the course of our discussion today. So Matt and Todd, welcome. Thank y'all for being with me today. Let me start with a question to both of you. What was the process like that created these recommendations? What spurred this discussion and ultimately the recommendations that were sent to the NAR Board of Directors? Can you tell us about the process? How were these changes made?
Matt, you want to go ahead and take that since you were kind of involved from the start?
Okay, sure. And I'll be interested in any of your perspectives. You know, he was on the big committee and I sat in a few other tables as well. So by all means, fill in as you see fit. But the quick overview is it was done slowly over many months, over the course of many, many meetings. And it was deliberative, it was protracted, it was transparent, and it was democratic. And what does that mean? So we had multiple state and local leaders reach out to Pro Standards, write letters to NAR asking, actually they reached out to NAR asking for better tools to address the sort of the eruption, the proliferation of discriminatory hate speech episodes. And I'll give you an example of one that was probably the most memorably over the top. Former realtor shaking an AR-15 into his video camera, talking in the immediate aftermath of the George Floyd killing, talking about how he had just dropped $2,000 on the firearm that he was shaking and he could not wait to use it on some N-words. I mean, that level of vitriol and abhorrent behavior on the part of realtors. And then a lot of others that were just really, really awful hate speech. So multiple state and local leaders wrote to NAR. Then President Vince Malta kicked it to Pro Standards. He didn't say fix it. He didn't say do something. He said look at it and see if this is something that you believe that your lane would be able to handle. Because those sorts of incidents, if they were outside the real estate transaction, the code couldn't touch them. And so if you had a local or a state exec who felt like we have to do something, they were forced to deal with it very imperfectly through membership duties. So we had a meeting with the full committee on June 29th, and that kicked off with a 90-minute, no-holds-barred conversation on race and real estate with 5 black panelists that I had selected. So that would have been the first that Todd would have seen of all of this. He would have seen the meeting packet that had a literal stack of bigoted hate speech. A stack of it was in our agenda, so we had some idea what it was we were trying to deal with. And at that first meeting, after that conversation, that's not a group, it's over 100 people with members from every state in the country. It's not a group that we quickly learned is well suited to wordsmithing by committee, but the sentiment by the end of the meeting was overwhelmingly, we believe we can do something about this, and we want to refer it to the more specialized Professional Standards Interpretations and Procedures Advisory Board. So big committee meeting June 29th, 5 meetings of the more specialized deep in the weeds wordsmithing group, 5 more meetings over 3 months. Then back to the full committee on October 5th. More debate. All the recommendations were passed out of committee about 10-1. Then October 5th to November 13th, another 5 weeks when the recommendations had been passed out of committee awaiting board action when they were debated to death. So I personally had hammered out probably tens of thousands of words of responses to questions and concerns. And then an hour and 48-minute committee report at the board of directors meeting with lots of debate. And at the end of that, all of the recommendations passed. So that's what I mean by protracted, transparent, and ultimately democratic.
NAR is often criticized for being a little slow to act, but it certainly sounds like not only did NAR act quickly, but also very methodically. There's just seemed like a lot of opportunity for input and review.
So I want to hear Todd's perspective, because he sat there and had a lot of this stuff dumped on him. I had done some behind the scenes, but what was how would you describe the sentiment of that group on that June 29th meeting after we had heard the 90 minutes of race and real estate and then the pile of hate speech? What was your read on the room?
So I can sum up in one word, Matt. It was outrage. We couldn't believe that this was still happening in 2020 to members of the public, to other agents around the country, that they were still having to deal with these issues. It was brought up, and I think it's probably appropriate to bring it up today. Every single one of you on this call is in multiple protected classes. Every one of you has a sex. Every one of you has a national origin. Every one of you has a color. So as we look at it, we're all parts of these things. And it went back to, we all talked about the golden rule, if you remember, in the preamble, and it comes back to us treating people that way. And, I was really outraged, Matt. I mean, as I looked at it again, I haven't seen this type of behavior, but to see it there in black and white on video, and then to have these Black leaders talk about their experiences, not only with the public, but also with their colleagues that they work with, was beyond something that I could imagine would still be happening. And so, I would agree with you. It took longer than we wanted, but I mean, Matt didn't say it, but I think it was vetted by 3 separate counsels. So we had the attorneys looking at everything we were doing. We wanted to make sure that whatever we recommended was the right thing, and that it was appropriate. And that we could hold people responsible for doing this, because not only would you see these terrible things they would say, but their next post would be, "Welcome to my open house," at 123 Main Street, with their realtor pin on. And folks, that's not how I want to be perceived in my market. And it was besmirching the name of all of you everywhere.
Matt, you mentioned the panel on race that you held. And I watched it, and I know many others did too. Can you tell me a little bit about how were those people selected, and what was your kind of personal takeaway from that session?
I picked them, and they're all friends, and the way those conversations sounded, reaching out to all 5 of those panelists individually, was, if you are willing, what I would like to invite you to do is come be part of a no-holds-barred conversation, no ground rules, no restrictions, no questions in advance. I get to ask you anything. And you're going to subject yourself to this primarily for the benefit of a really large group of 95% white people. And you're going to bare your souls in the hopes that we can jolt them into some enhanced understanding. And, because of some really transformative relationships I've made over years before any of this stuff came up, I had enough trust established that they all said yes. And part of the video, I mean, I nearly lost it during part of that conversation. Just like I'm watching you guys today in this Zoom mosaic, it was all cameras on. I watched people physically recoil on my committee, in repulsion and disgust at what they were hearing. And the most dehumanizing of these was Joanne Poole, former state president of Maryland, had been a candidate for NAR leadership, and an extraordinary leader, an extraordinary person, more than once in the last decade, had literally been showing up to a showing, always dressed to the nines, left on the doorstep. Your clients can come in, you, based solely on skin color, you will wait out here. And it happened over and over. And as she said, I don't know what cost me more, the humiliation or the lost business from stuff like that. But I mean, and so not only were we, people that look like me, not only were we confronted with this firsthand, but I felt guilty. By the end of that, I felt guilty having somebody like Joanne even have to go back to a repeated, utterly dehumanizing experience just for the enlightenment of people that look like me, except this stuff doesn't happen in front of people that look like me. And so there's really no substitute for hearing it firsthand from people who don't look like me. So these are all close friends, relationships with whom have utterly transformed the way I look at a lot of issues, because they've helped pull back the curtain. I won't know what it's like to sell real estate while black, but they have helped pull back the curtain, give me a front row seat, so I get a look at a little bit of what they see, and I can't unsee that stuff.
I got the sense, Matt, that some of the stories that they shared were, I mean, it felt like with some of them, it was the first time they had ever shared it. And I don't know if you knew ahead of time what they were going to say.
Not at all.
It was the genuine impact of that session was so powerful. Well, tell us real quick, we're all here today to learn more about what these changes mean, right now to realtors across the country, across South Carolina. Tell us what these changes mean today for our realtor members.
So the centerpiece of the changes is a new standard of practice. So Article 10, the anti-discrimination and fair housing article, not one word of that was changed. We added a new standard of practice that flows directly from the pre-existing language of Article 10. And I'll read it to you because it is the centerpiece of all of this. Realtors must not use harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. 60% of the verbiage is just the list of the protected classes. Can't be harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs based on. So it's a two-step analysis. And that's important because if you're not somebody who's following pro standards, which is probably a good thing if you have a well-balanced life and are productive in real estate, you might have seen this news flash and thought, well, holy cow, now there's going to be a professional standards thought police, and anyone offended by anything is going to claim that I'm committing hate speech. And I just want to underscore, this is a narrow target. Harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs based on or directed at somebody on the basis of an Article 10 protected class. This doesn't go after your politics, doesn't go after the candidate bumper sticker on your car, doesn't go after your religious beliefs. And then everything else is an outgrowth of that. There was a policy statement 29 that previously in modern history limited the code applicability to real estate transactions and real estate activities. That went away. Now, I'll remind everyone, all the other articles are intrinsically real estate related. The target was bigoted hate speech, even outside of real estate. And so we had to open the code up to apply outside of real estate. And then everything else is, relatively speaking, more minor administrative stuff.
Well, a lot of what I've heard, is that there's realtors, are conducting business. There's no 9-to-5 realtors that I know of. Realtors work weekends, they work after hours, they're working at the grocery store, they're working at the Starbucks. It's hard to say you're off the clock. I know, Todd, I know your market is extremely busy in Columbia right now. It's hard to say that you're never on the clock, right?
Yeah, I would agree, Nick. I mean, I'm always wearing my name tag. I'm always wearing my realtor pin. People are asking me, how's the market? We're talking about it. Because I know so many people from being in the market for so long. And so you never really turn it off. It's part of who we are as people. We're servants of the people when it comes to real estate, and we're their resource in our markets. And they've trusted us with their most valuable asset, which is which is really important. So I couldn't been prouder of Matt and the Pro Standards Committee nationally for the work we did. At first I was almost embarrassed to be a realtor when we started the process. And I tell you, by the time we ended it and came up with it and the board of directors passed it, I couldn't have been prouder. So it was, I don't know what a difference we made. You can't change people what's in their heart, but we certainly can cut down of some of the things that were really vulgar and racist and had no place in our communities. We're community builders, and this was tearing communities apart. Based on these protected classes, and there was no place for it. So, something had to be done. I'm certainly proud of what we did. The only thing I'm worried about a little bit is enforcement. And we talked a lot about that as well in committee. We luckily are privy, at least in this state and around the country, to fair-minded individuals serving on grievance and professional standards who've been vetted at the local and the state level. In most cases. And I feel really confident that they're going to do the right thing if they're to see any of these Article 10 violations, especially Standard of Practice 10-5.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, what some of the confusion that we've seen in this has to, there's social media is one of my biggest pet peeves because unfortunately, so many of us get our news from social media, and it's not always the most accurate source, right? So, the purpose of holding sessions like this is to make sure that our members have a full opportunity to ask questions, to get the information straight from the source, so that we can make sure there's no confusion in the marketplace, no confusion in the membership about what these changes mean and what impact they're going to have on their business.
Nick, there was one other change to the code that we didn't speak about other than 10-5. It was redefining breach of the public trust. And it also, so it included anything deal with money and fraud. Now it also could potentially include violations of fair housing under Article 10 and an obligation of us to report it to the necessary authorities at the state, local, and federal levels if we do see that occur. So that was one additional change that was recommended and passed.
And more specifically, violations of public trust used to include willful discrimination, but Article 10 has never included willful. So it was just incongruous. You could have a hearing panel that found a violation of Article 10, but then had to do a separate analysis of whether it was willful or not to determine whether they became mandated reporters. And the last qualifier for that is, when people talk about free speech, NAR is a private organization. We're not bound by the First Amendment. The government is. Your state licensing authority, your fair housing government agencies, they are. They can't generally come after you for private hate speech, no matter how abhorrent. So that mandated reporting requirement is only specific to real estate related acts. So if it's private hate speech, you can still be sanctioned under the code, but it wouldn't trigger the mandated reporting out.
Good point.
Well, let me thank you both, Matt and Todd. Thank you for having this candid conversation with us today. We appreciate your leadership and the service that you've provided and will provide ongoing to our great industry and association. Thank you both.